Welcome everyone. I'm Councillor Lynn Stagg, Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation. I'll be chairing this meeting. Please be assured that we have put appropriate cleansing and social distancing measures in place to ensure that this meeting is undertaken in COVID-secure manner. Public seating has been made available. Can I please ask members and officers to remain seated throughout the duration of the meeting? Housekeeping. Excuse me. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, I don't know that we're expecting a fire drill, are we? No? Okay, well, let's assume we're not. Please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble near Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust's fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign up when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Everyone speaking via a microphone will be recorded and broadcast on the website, including those making deputations. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they have finished in order for the camera to move to the person speaking. We have all read the report, so officers, please just highlight any developments that have occurred since publication. Now go around introducing people. On my left, Councillor Peter Harris.
Councillor Scott Peter Harris. I'm the Conservative spokesperson for Traffic and Transportation.
Thank you.
I'm Councillor Graham Heaney and I'm the Labour Group spokesperson for Traffic and Transportation.
Thank you. Martin.
Martin Livers, Assistant Director for Infrastructure.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, I didn't recognise you. I'm so sorry, Caroline. Yes. Thank you. Michelle.
Michelle Love, Safer Travel Manager.
Thank you. Is it Damon?
Good afternoon, Councillor Stack. Damon Leung, Senior Transport Planner.
Thank you. Hayley.
Hayley Chivers, Acting Transport Planning Manager.
Simon.
Simon Bell, Principal Public Transport Officer.
Former Councillor Malcolm Hay, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself? I mean, I know I've said your name, but just for... No, just introducing yourself.
Malcolm Hay, resident of Hilsey and a former member of this chamber for over 10 years and here today to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Wayne.
Wayne Layton, I'm a Finance Manager here at Portsmouth City Council.
And is that Gareth? Yes.
Yeah, Gareth James, Future Transport Zone Manager for Project Manager for Solent Transport for Portsmouth City Council.
Thank you. Susie.
Councillor Susie Horton, here to speak on one of the items.
Thank you. And
Alison Harper, Local Democracy Officer.
Thank you, Alison. Welcome, everybody. Are there any apologies, Alison? No? Okay. Declaration of members' interest. Councillor Heaney, have you got any interest to declare?
No interest to declare.
Thank you.
No interest at all, Chair.
Pardon?
No interest at all.
Okay, thank you. Right, we're going to start with the first, it's item number 3, Portsmouth Rental e-scooter trial traffic regulation order. And who's going to introduce this? Is it, Damon, yes? Oh, Gareth, yeah, I was wondering, I thought you were pointing at Damon. Sorry, Gareth.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to consider responses to the experimental traffic regulation order in operation since the 16th of March 2021 for Portsmouth's rental e-scooter trial and the next steps after the traffic order expires on the 15th of September 2022. Just a little bit of background to this. So the e-scooter trial was when it began in March 2021. That was under an experimental traffic order, which is what the government advised was used by all participating trial areas. Of course, the trial was not originally envisaged to have lasted as long as it has done. So while the last meeting of this board in March did extend the trial until the end of November this year. What that meant was that the traffic order, which enables e-scooters to be used in bike infrastructure, so bike lanes and so forth, was going to expire on the 15th of September. So in common with other trial areas around the country, it meant that we had a gap essentially between the end of the experimental order, which can only last for 18 months, and when the trial was approved to run until. So as we had said at that last meeting, we were going to take advice to ensure that we were putting forward the best way to bridge that gap, and that's what we're here to do today. So the recommendations, I'll just read these out. It notes that in accordance with the Department for Transport's guidance, Portsmouth implemented an experimental traffic order when it launched its rental e-scooter trial in March 2021 to allow rental e-scooters in cycle tracks, cycle lanes and bus lanes. Notes the decision on the 18th of March 2022 at a meeting of the Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation that the trial should continue until the 30th of November 2022. Notes that experimental traffic orders can only remain in place for up to 18 months and that Portsmouth's traffic order is therefore scheduled to expire on the 15th of September 2022. Notes the responses received to the experimental traffic order during the 6-month consultation period from March to September 2021. Approves converting the experimental traffic order to a permanent traffic order from the 15th of September 2022. And then the final recommendation that I'd really like to highlight is important, is that it notes that this decision to make the experimental traffic order permanent would in no way constitute a decision to permit an e-scooter operation in any form after November 2022, and that a further Cabinet Member decision would be required to enable this and to extend the enabling vehicle special order, which is what's needed essentially to run an e-scooter trial, beyond the 30th of November 2022. So with that, I think, rather than wading into any more technical detail in the report, I hope that's enough background to the recommendations, but I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. Mr. Hay, would you like to make your deputation now?
Thank you, Chairman. Whoever thought electric, i.e. e-scooters, would be a good environmental solution for cities like Portsmouth was not living in the real world and certainly is not familiar with the city of Portsmouth. These machines will make a profit whether rented or sold, and perhaps that's what's behind the idea of progressing these schemes. They are basically death trap machines. These people may be interested in profit, but they're certainly not interested in the health and well-being of those who might be riding them, or the members of public and others who interact with these machines. These e-scooters are a danger to riders themselves, to pedestrians, and to other road users alike. It might be okay to use them in the wide boulevards of California, but certainly not in the cramped streets of Portsmouth, when there can be bad weather for most of the year. It is obvious to experienced road users that these machines are inherently unstable and difficult to control, especially in emergencies. With two small wheels and the user standing upright, even keeping them in a straight line is difficult, let alone performing a dangerous right turn or starting from scratch at a roundabout, etc. Contrast this difficulty with the far safer cyclist whose weight is properly balanced over two large wheels, is able to turn round easily to see the traffic around them and to offer a hand signal. Such a contrast. I have yet to see an e-scooter rider wearing high visible clothing or a helmet. Jack Samler, the VROI UK General Manager, says helmets are critically important to keeping riders safe. We are urging riders to wear a helmet. Well, it's just not working. Have you seen one around the city wearing a helmet? I certainly haven't. And people are being seriously injured, both riders and others. A drunken e-scooter user said he did not know it was a motor vehicle. A 75-year-old lady in Fratton Road was hit by a scooter in March that did not stop. A teenager was critically injured in Paulsgrove following a crash with a car in June last year. A man had to be airlifted to QA following falling off his e-scooter in Landport Terrace. The Health Trust Chief Executive, Chief Financial Officer, Mark Orchard, said scooters would be another way to get to and from our site at QA. Does he realise how many of those people are going to get there on their e-scooters in the back of an ambulance needing emergency treatment when, of course, our hospital is overworked as it is at the moment? Now, Councillor Stagg has said that e-scooters can reduce car journeys if they are properly ridden. And are they? What people say, however, and what they actually do are two different things. How many students have you seen carrying their papers and tablets on an e-scooter? How many people have you seen doing their shopping with bags over their shoulders on their e-scooter? None, just like me. It's mainly young people using these scooters on extra joy trips around the city. Do these riders keep to the rules? An awful lot don't. I've reported 4 VOI users to Sweden's headquarters for riding on the pavement and 2 on one scooter in one instance in Fratton Road. Whether these users will be banned for renting for a while or not, I do not know, but I know it's worth ringing Voy to tell them and make the council aware, therefore, of just how many bad users there are of these machines. The number to complain is 0800 376 8179. I'll repeat that, 0800 376 8179. You get through to Sweden and they speak good English. Make a note of the 4 alphanumeric registration code. Not a lot of car journeys to work or whatever are being replaced by these fair weather machines. And in bad weather, who would actually use one? And what about the confusion this rental scheme, this authorised legal scheme is causing? You see lots of people on their private illegal scooters riding around saying, oh, there are people over there riding, why can't I ride mine? In fact, catching the bus tonight, I had a 10-minute conversation with a student, young man, who says he has a provisional licence and was riding his private £250 scooter on the pavement. He wasn't aware that he is doing all this illegal. This is the problem. The confusion to many, the great number, who now have private e-scooters seems to legitimise their travel because others are using this VOI scheme. And as I mentioned, there are so many of these private scooters around. Just what are the police doing? I don't know. They don't seem to be tackling them, just like they're not tackling cyclists on the pavement or otherwise being illegally used. The Metropolitan Police have confiscated 4,000 e-scooters. Yes, 4,000 e-scooters. And the users will have to pay a substantial fine if they're ever going to get the money back. The great majority of people I speak to think these e-scooters are absolute madness. The letters of the Portsmouth News have had a majority of contributors saying this is a terrible scheme, they should be withdrawn, and people not subject to danger because of them. I believe the scheme should end in September and not be extended. I trust you, Chairman, to not extend the scheme. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hay. Councillor Heaney, can I just answer a few of the points that before you speak, or would you like to speak now? I don't mind either way. Okay, thank you. Mr. Hay, helmets. Correct me if I'm wrong on these, Gareth. Pick them up. Helmets are not enforceable, and that's the same on cycles, I believe. So that is a major problem. And I believe, if the figures you gave us last week, 163,000 fewer car journeys have been made in Portsmouth. A lot of those have been for work, or getting to school or college rather than school, but some obviously have been for leisure. So there has been a saving, and I think, I can't remember the exact amounts, Gareth, you will tell me, we have saved somewhere like 83,000 litres of petrol. I could be wrong.
I'll try to find the number, but yes, it's a lot, and carbon savings as well, of course.
Yeah. VOI also operates a scheme for heroes, so it's veterans, for example, so they get much lower rates, for job seekers, for students, so that encouraging more people not to use cars. Reporting is welcome, and VOI welcome that. And there are sanctions if somebody is caught riding on a scooter. They get a 7-day ban. If they're caught a second time, it's a 30-day ban, and if they're caught a third time, it's banned for life. Am I right, Gareth? Thank you.
That's right. Certainly, twin riding and pavement riding would result in bans. Yeah.
They shouldn't be riding on the pavements, and you're right. The police should be doing something about it, but they haven't got the manpower to do it, and we unfortunately don't have the power to do it. So that's answering just a few of the points you made. I don't know if you picked up on others, Gareth.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd just like to give a sort of quite a general response, because there was a lot of detail in there, and I think all of the points that were being brought up were certainly very pertinent. Things like the safety record, the helmet wearing, how many car trips they're replacing, what percentage of people are using it for commuting versus leisure. These are all the things that we're receiving data on, constantly speaking about in officers' meetings and meetings with members. I certainly was quite sceptical at the beginning of some of these trials as to how many car trips they would replace, and I didn't want to see them replacing active travel. And we've been very reassured by the surveys done here that 60% of e-scooter trips are replacing car and to a lesser degree taxi trips rather than active travel. On this safety side, I mean, I think you sort of quite rightly intimated that the private scooters have been a bigger concern, those accidents which resulted in people being airlifted and so forth. I'm pleased to say we've had nothing like that with the voice scheme, which of course has the 12.5 mile an hour speed limits, mandatory training requirements, all kinds of sort of geofencing technologies to stop them from going in certain places, and the reporting ability, like you rightly said. So there's a lot of measures in place, and the quality of the scooter itself, tyre widths, which make it much safer for the users and for non-users compared to the illegal private scooters. So I think that we are certainly pushing the government, and have been, to take more action, give police more powers and so forth on that. So fully agree with you on those things. There's the report that was made in March to extend the scheme until the end of this November has a lot more detail, a lot of those numbers that Councillor Stagg was trying to recall around some of those savings, carbon savings, all of that kind of thing. So I would encourage you to look at that report. We'll be bringing another report in September regarding any decision to extend the scheme beyond November. You may be aware that the government has now invited local authorities that are participating in trials to continue those trials until May 2024, which would be down to, again, this group to decide. So all I would say in the meantime is I'd certainly be happy, and I know Transport colleagues would be happy to continue this dialogue with you, respond to individual questions and concerns. We're always happy to do that for everybody, all residents and stakeholders. So yeah, thank you. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Gareth. Councillor Heaney. Have you got any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. In fact, Gavin's slightly clarified one of the things I was going to ask about the extension of the trial. You've clarified the sort of timescale and time frame you were looking at to do that, because I could understand why you wouldn't necessarily want to make the decision today, because we need some more data and information about how it's operated throughout the whole of the almost a calendar year to see whether we want to or not, and take up the Department of Transport's offer to do that. I suppose the main thing that I wanted to clarify really was around the conversion from ETRO to TRO, because this now becomes a permanent TRO, and I'm glad there's a comment there to say that this doesn't mean that the e-scooters are now permanently allowed, because that is a government requirement, so they're not linked, and it's good to make that point because there is potential for people to misunderstand what that means. But as I understand it from what we've done previously with ETROs, is that we have implemented them, and if we've decided to make that particular change permanent, we've then gone out for a formal consultation to confirm that people are happy with that. I don't see that being said here, although you do say you're not going to implement it until the 15th of September. So will you be actually doing the formal consultation on the proposal to make it a permanent TRO, so that you can implement it from the 15th of September? Because the other issue that comes back, well, if you get loads and loads of objections, is it going to have to come back here again? Because we haven't got that at the moment. There's reference to the original ETRO and the Hampshire Police comment, but we haven't got anything about any issue around the permanent TRO.
Gareth, have you got an answer to that? I'm sure I've read it somewhere in the report.
Yeah, sure. So the experimental traffic order, the maximum they can be for it is 18 months. And the consultation period is the first 6 months. So that's not to say that, if somebody makes comments or objections after that first 6 months that they can't be taken into account, but the formal period for consultation is the first 6 months. I can certainly, see that there's an argument for carrying out more surveys and so forth, but we're planning to do that anyway, as we have done throughout the trial, to continue to get that feedback, which helps inform not only whether the trial should continue, but also things like if the mode shift was going up or down from that 60% I mentioned, so that we could react to it. There's a wealth of data. Portsmouth Council's actually gone a lot further than most other trial areas in carrying out these surveys, getting some really robust, statistically significant findings to help inform it, and we'll continue to do that. But there's, the consultation period is the first 6 months. That is the experimental traffic order legislation. And I know that from also experience, elsewhere, that is normally adhered to pretty closely. Thank you.
So just to clarify, you're saying that there isn't a requirement to consult after. You only do it in the first 6 months of the operation of the order. I'm not sure that's made very clear. I must admit I didn't quite pick that up. And this is the problem. The public don't necessarily understand the way in which we do things and the processes. And I think we need to be much clearer about what that is. Because if somebody saw an experimental traffic order advertised, they might say, oh, it's only experimental, it's going to be for X time, and then they'll consult us about it once they've finished. But of course that isn't the case. And I think there is, if I can get confused, well maybe but I'm certainly the public won't be very clear there. So I do think we need to clarify this much more when we're doing these, because the public need to be given the opportunity to have their say about the operation of it, and say that you have only got 6 months of the operation before we will then close the consultation, and then we may decide to make it permanent, and that is not made clear. So I do think that needs to be made clearer.
Do you have any other comments?
I'd like to say something about the government's proposals, because in a sense it's a bit of a response to what former Councillor Hay was saying, because I do think there are some issues there which we need to think about, which I'd like to comment on, but I'll leave that till later. It's more a comment than a question.
Councillor Peter Harris then. Do you have any questions?
Thank you for that. It's just some questions for Gareth. I mean, how many docking stations and scooters have been added since the initial trial began?
You're testing me, not least because the trial began before I started my role. I think it's been about doubled at this point.
Was just a quick, we can clarify that they have been added after. How many have been added after the initial consultation?
I would say about 30 to 40. Just looking
on a
at colours.
percentage?
As I say, about doubled.
Okay, so we've had the 6 months consultation and then we've added more. Okay, so that means effectively the consultation is based upon previous data that you had. So while the scheme has effectively doubled, you're basing it on the first 6 months. So it's not the same. Regardless of whether you say it is the same, it's not the same. This is what is going to put you, Councillor Stagg, in some difficulty today, because you're effectively asking us, you're being asked to make a decision based on inadequate information, and I don't have to spell out any further what that means. Okay, and I think you have two choices, and I'm quite happy to offer you those two choices. You put it out to a 21-day TRO based on the information we have now, the fact that it has doubled as confirmed by Gareth, or you pass it and I'll call it in.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt Harris. Have you got any comments to make?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that.
Thank you.
So the experimental traffic order, it's to allow the e-scooters to use cycling infrastructure. So the experimental traffic order is really the whole point of it was so that if an e-scooter was where we would want it to be, in a cycling lane, then it wouldn't be technically it would, if without this traffic order, then it would have been not obeying the law of the land. So that's why the Department for Transport, under the government's guidance, told all the trial areas to use the experimental traffic order in this way to legislate that. So the experimental traffic order and that 6-month consultation was nothing to do with the actual scheme itself inherently, but whether to have e-scooters, how big the scheme should be, how many docking stations there should be, etc., etc. That isn't in the scope of this traffic order. So it's really important to remember that it is quite a narrow consultation.
I understand that it's very narrow, but I mean I've just asked you a question and you give me an answer saying it's doubled, and the members of the public have a right, in my opinion, to question whether the fact it has doubled, and it has, and their opinion with the first 6 months are going to be very different than what it is now. What I don't feel we as a council should be doing is implementing something and saying, yeah, this is fine, absolutely not. Because we've got a gentleman that's come here today who clearly isn't happy with the order because it has changed, and I think we've all got nods that it has changed around the table. So I just think it's a very unenviable place for the cabinet member to be, because the report doesn't have what I would call significant information. I've looked at the IIA and the EIA, and they're actually signed off. I think one was October last year, and I think one was August last year. So they're effectively a year out of date. They're not up to date as they should be. I mean, do you want me to really pick out that and say the EIA is incorrect, the IIA is incorrect? So I mean, I could really pick holes in all of this if I really wanted to. It's a question of process. We need to make sure we're doing things correctly.
The EIA and the IIA are both up to date, so apologies if somehow the date's wrong on there, but they've been checked and updated when the last extension was approved in March, and so the reports, the EIA and the IIA that have been published alongside this one, just for completeness, certainly have been updated, and they've also been checked by the Equalities Officer at the Council only a few weeks ago. So I can assure you on that front. With regards to the experimental traffic order, again, to reiterate, any consultation response that would have been given in that 6 months regarding whether e-scooters are a good thing or a bad thing, and the scheme itself, they wouldn't have actually been objections to this traffic order because it's out of scope. But the other thing that I think is worth saying is that if there had been significant changes to the scheme, significant enough, it would actually have made our lives a bit easier, because, as I say, all of the trial areas were in this same situation where, because the government had twice extended the length of the trial beyond what an experimental traffic order can, we have this gap. And so when we were looking at how to bridge the gap, one of the options that was looked at with the lawyers, the transport lawyers, was whether you could bring in a new experimental traffic order to cover that period from mid-September until November. And the reason that we were advised against doing that was because there hadn't been significant enough changes to the scheme to warrant a different experimental traffic order. So although it has grown incrementally, there haven't been any fundamental changes to the scheme that would have meant doing a new order. We weren't allowed to do that, essentially, so this was advised to be the best way forwards.
I mean, I understand.
Can I just add that in 2.6, in the recommendations, it says, notes that a decision to make the ETRO permanent would in no way constitute a decision to permit an e-scooter operation in any form after November 2022, and that a further Cabinet member decision would be required to enable this and to extend the enabling vehicle special order VSO beyond the 30th of November. So we could surely consult again, or...
Councillor Thacker, if I may, I think that would be a good idea to put it out, even for 21 days, just to give the public a viewpoint.
Yes, but it says it in there. There's a recommendation. It's got to come back to me, or to whoever is the Cabinet member, so that could be consulted on as a TRO at that time. Am I right, or am I completely wrong?
So it certainly will need to come back here for a decision. There's no requirements to consult, and that would be, as I say, it wouldn't be consistent with the experimental traffic order regulations. But as I say, we have carried out surveys before, and we were speaking actually just this week about scheduling the next survey so that we can have all of the data that is required for you and other members to make the right decision, for Portsmouth from November onwards. So we'll take that away and make sure that we, get the required data for that decision.
I don't see a problem in that.
Councillor Stagg, can I just get this through my head? Are you quite happy to go out and do some more consultation work on this basis?
That's what I just suggested, because this is only to bridge the gap between the end of the experimental traffic regulation order and when the government says the next bit starts, which is in November.
Yeah, I understand.
Bridge that gap so we can go out. There's no reason, we may not be required to, but there is no reason why we can't go out and consult so we have up-to-date information.
Absolutely. I'd be
not a problem as far as I'm concerned.
I would be very heartened if you took on my recommendation to go out and do some more consultation.
If it makes you happy that it's your recommendation, Councillor Peter Harris, I'll go along with it.
Thank you. That's all I asked for.
Good.
You're very kind.
I am, always. Any more questions from anybody or comments? Councillor Heaney.
I mean, just that, listening to the comments that are being made from officers about TROs, I'm getting even more confused about the weeds that we get into regarding legislation, because I'm now not quite sure what a TRO actually is about, what we're permitting. Is it it's the physical use of the road space, I presume, is what it's about. But again, this is not necessarily clearly explained. People think it's something different, and I have been under that impression as well. But we may want to come back to that and a bit later, just to make clear when we do TROs exactly what we're saying. Maybe make it a bit more of a sort of layperson's explanation rather than a technical explanation on.
I would blame the government for this, because they.
Well, yeah, I know there's got to be some technical stuff about this, but
so
yeah, it
we're making the best of a bad job.
It does get a bit confusing. I mean, can I just say something about the government's approach, because this email that we've got attached to the report is actually really helpful in getting a sense of what the government is proposing to do, because I don't know whether Mr. Hare has had a chance to look at it, but it has set out that the government does intend to legislate to allow for other vehicles other than cars and bikes and scooters and motorbikes to be allowed to be used on the road, and we have a variety of them, and they're trying to frame legislation around what might be produced in the future, and they will have to do that if they're going to allow e-scooters to be used on the road for the longer term. Interestingly, they say here these rules would include robust technical requirements, so presumably that the e-scooters that are used on the road must meet certain technical standards, presumably in terms of wheel size, power, whatever, yet to be decided. and also says most likely a set of requirements for users, because that's the other thing that I know Mr. Hay brought up, the idea that if you're a user, you have to have a helmet, possibly. You have to have high vis, particularly at night, which I think will be a good requirement, those sorts of things. So those sorts of things could be included, and I hope the government will give that.
Well, yes, that's what VOI have got anyway, all of these
yes,
recommendations.
but as you rightly pointed out,
Yeah.
currently it's only advisory. People don't have to do it if they don't want to. They can be advised to wear a helmet.
No,
they
but
can
they
be advised
have
to wear
got
high vis.
indicators, lights.
Yeah, they've got
rear lights
indicators and lights. Yeah, that's the
forward
technical.
lights, insurance.
That's the
You
technical
have to have
requirements.
a driving license.
Well, again, that's part of the requirements of the users, that people won't be able to ride them if they don't have a driving license, etc.
Absolutely, as long as there are people there to.
I think the other
ensure.
issue that I think Mr. Hay raised is what we do about the currently non-legal scooters. I think the government's got an interesting choice to make about this, because if they're going to have technical requirements for the use of e-scooters on the road, it would make sense then not to allow retailers to sell e-scooters that don't meet those requirements, because it is very clear that no matter what the rules say, retailers sell them and people use them on the roads, and it does appear that retailers may or may not pay lip service to the idea of telling people they can't use on the roads, but they do end up being used on the roads. So I don't think it's going to be viable to allow retailers to sell these if they don't meet the requirements. So they will have to look at the possibility of not allowing people to sell scooters that don't make those requirements. Then we've got the issue of what we do about the legacy e-scooters that will be around, which then have to be dealt with. So I think there are some interesting things that we will pursue, and I don't know whether the council will itself present any sort of evidence to any bill committees or legislation through the MPs or whatever to lobby about what we think, because having seen the scheme operate, I think we have some useful experience that we could then feed into any potential legislation that comes through. Because although Mr. Hayes says they shouldn't be legal, I think the general intention of the government is very clear. They are going to make them legal. And
I think they're going to make a new class, aren't they?
Yeah, they're going to make a new class of vehicles,
fit.
which is how it makes them legal.
Yes.
I think the other thing that needs to be included, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've noticed, particularly around where I live, people are using like sort of mini scooters, which they're riding around on, which are like small scooters. I saw them zooming around Milton Common the other night when I was walking, and they had no lights, no indication, nothing at all. They were very fast, and they obviously have been purchased somewhere, but again, not vehicles that I would necessarily think you could use on the road. So we do need to do something about that. So I think that is really something we need to bear in mind. As far as the approval of the TRO with consultation, I'm very happy to go ahead with it.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy with, from the point of view that the additional time would be to allow the government, who belatedly are gathering information in, and once they've got that data, they can then make legislation that will apply. And I take your points, Mr. Hay, absolutely, because a lot of the privately owned ones, looking at them, I don't know how they actually manage to stay in one piece, because some of them are so flimsy, and then the people riding. But actually, I'd like to just point out one thing. This is an argument I've been having with VOI for about a year now, about they say about serious accidents. Their definition of serious accidents isn't most people's definition of serious accidents. Somebody fell off their VOI scooter on the seafront, and somebody called an ambulance in precaution because they banged their head. That's considered a serious accident. The person was okay and went off on the scooter. So that sort of thing happens, but VOI are sticking by their own definition. But it makes it sound a lot worse than it really is. We've had, touch wood, no fatalities and no really serious accidents. But I'm happy to go along with this, because I think it will give the government time to collect the data, to get the legislation in place, because I think that's what is desperately needed. I would go along with all the recommendations, but I would like to add that you needn't put in the Councillor Peter Harris suggested it, but I totally agree with having consultation before the final decision, or in November. So if you can add that to it. So happy with that.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you. Can I just add as well, Councillor, if I may,
Thank
that
you,
I have
Mr.
just
Hay.
checked the date at the bottom of the EIA, and I can see that it would look as though it hasn't been reviewed since November last year, so that's something that we'll rectify for next time as well, so thank you.
I won't get so upset next time, Gareth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hay. Agenda item 4, proposed active Pompey neighbourhood consultation. Who's presenting this? It's Michelle. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Councillor Stagg. So yes, I'm here today to present the report for the Pompey Active Neighbourhood. So the purpose of the report is to seek approval from the Cabinet member to engage with residents and businesses within the Central South Sea ward via a consultation and engagement process to help develop proposals for the first of the active Pompey neighbourhoods. And the recommendation is that the Cabinet member approves the request notes the requirements for consultation to inform the future direction of active Pompey neighbourhoods and approves the initial informal consultation and engagement and further formal consultation which will draw on the feedback received following this. The background to this is that obviously the number of vehicle miles travelled within the city and generally within the country has increased year on year between the period of 2010 and 2019. We have a number of major A roads within the city, as well as other classifications of roads, and they are typically designed to carry the higher volume of vehicles. Unfortunately, some of the local streets obviously find that they take the brunt of vehicles and drivers trying to circumnavigate any kind of congestion on A-class or B-class roads, so end up with a large amount of through traffic. Particularly in the area of Central Southsea, where it's bordered by Fawcett Road, by Goldsmith Avenue, we have found that there is a lot of through traffic. In addition to this, speed surveys in April 2021 showed that there was speeding above the enforceable limit, particularly on Orchard Road, and obviously with a Pompey active neighbourhood where we would be anticipating, dependent on resident engagement, to put in some form of filter or ban turn or one-way street to make the area less attractive to through traffic. That would also obviously reduce the speed because there wouldn't be as many vehicles trying to navigate through the area as quickly as possible. Let me just scroll down. So part of the process will be to understand, to engage with the residents and to understand what they would like us to do. So it will be a fully interactive process so that we bring them on board with us and take them along the progress of the scheme so that there is a sense of community ownership within the scheme as well. And then formal consultation on the design of the scheme will be held, obviously following that resident feedback. So the introduction of active Pompey neighbourhoods supports the Portsmouth Transport Strategy, so the Local Transport Plan 4, and it is supporting the objective to prioritise walking and cycling by making the street environment safer, more attractive, more convenient for walking, cycling and micromobility, particularly for those shorter and more local trips. The anticipated outcome of the active Pompey neighbourhood is that it will make the residential and neighbourhood areas more pleasant and more livable. It will improve air quality, reduce surrounding traffic noise and improve road safety. It will create quieter and safer routes for active travel. And as the neighbourhood contains 4 schools in the proposed area, reducing motor vehicle traffic will obviously have a significant benefit for the health and well-being of young people. And it will also aim, although obviously we would need to carry it out, to bring a greater sense of connectivity and sense of community into the neighbourhood. That's the summary of the report. I'm very happy to take questions and provide further information. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Susie, Councillor Horton, would you like to do your deputation now?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm doing this deputation obviously with my ward councillor hat on for Central Southsea, and I'd just like to say that I welcome this proposal for this area. I hope that it can be done really thoroughly and that the council can use this model of engagement subsequently in other areas of the city where I absolutely acknowledge the similar issues exist. I obviously welcome it for the health and well-being of the residents, for cleaner air, more neighbourliness, greener environment, etc., as has just been outlined. The area already has led on some innovative projects around school streets and play streets. So I think it would be interesting to see the level of engagement and the ideas that come out of residents who've already expressed a commitment and willingness to embrace this, excuse the pun, direction of travel. But the aspect of the report that I wanted to focus on is the nature of the consultation, and I suppose my plea to you as Cabinet Member is to ensure that the way the consultation is done focuses on a few things that I want to highlight. One is, as it says in the report, the engagement of residents, but also schools and businesses. The second thing is around the speed at which things are done, and sometimes the council gets accused of not doing things quickly enough, but I think this needs to be not rushed, and it needs to build on the high quality engagement and the ideas, because to take residents with us on this way through this project. The other thing I'd like the engagement to focus on is the fact that so much of the area already has this type of infrastructure in place, and that there's not this sense of changing everything for the sake of it. And finally, that there's consideration given to any ideas around any displacement of cars to other areas, and that's given due thought and communicated really clearly. So basically I wanted to do is just to say, I know it's never easy to do anything relating to travel in this city, but what I think is refreshing about this report is the emphasis on the information and the engagement with residents around whether it goes through after informal consultation to a formal consultation. And I just plead with you to focus on the things that I've emphasised. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pater-Harris, got any questions?
Thank you. My first question is quite a simple one. Why was Central Southsea chosen?
There was already an identified speed issue, particularly within roads where residents had written in or sent in inquiries about speeding. It links in very well with the East-West Active Travel Corridor that was initially approved when the Conservative Party was in administration in 2018, and that the current administration has more fully developed. So there are very close links to providing active travel infrastructure to be able to access the area. And as we said, it is a area of high density housing with 4 schools in it, and an area where it's surrounded by arterial roads that are more suitable for traffic carrying than going through the through traffic. So they were the primary reasons why the area was chosen for the Pompey active Pompey neighbourhood.
Thank you. I'm just going to follow up on that. So obviously you mentioned speeding. You've had significant contact from about speeding. How many other parts of the city do you have significant contact from speeding?
We receive about 2 requests a week for speeding surveys, which are added to a list, and then alongside Councillor Stagg and the administration, we go through the list dependent on the number of inquiries that we receive. Then we will make a prioritised list of areas where we need to carry out speed surveys. Those speed surveys then go forward as part of our prioritisation process for capital bids in the following year.
So this was basically what you've just said in a roundabout way, that Central Southsea was chosen because that's what the administration wanted.
The administration are the strategic leaders for the city, so obviously the advice that they give and the choices that they make, we do our very best to act upon. There was also clear evidence and data to show why this was a suitable area for an active neighbourhood.
Okay, my follow-up on that is going to be, I mean, you just said about there's clear data to show that. There's no data of that in this report. I think that would give us an informed view on how the decision was made, because at the moment we don't have an informed view. We're taking your word for it. And I'm happy to do that because I know that you do tell me the truth all the time anyway. But it would be nice for us to actually have that in front of us so we know what we're actually talking about.
Yeah, I completely understand that. The actual purpose of the report is to ask for permission from the Cabinet member to start the consultation process. We've already had a briefing with Councillor Horton and Councillor Garada and Councillor Fielding as the ward councillors. However, if you're saying that you would like it to be more widely open to council members from other wards or potentially full council, then if agreement is given today to start the resident consultation and engagement process, we can certainly put that data together. The actual purpose of this report is to ask for permission to go forward and start engagement.
I mean, that's a very fair comment. I mean, I'm just going to take it from my point of view, as a Conservative point of view. You've just made reference there to a councillor from the Labour Party and a councillor from the Liberal Democrats. We're not getting any sort of value from this as a member of the Conservative group or our residents that we represent. And I'm just going to give you an example of a few issues that we've had in Drayton and Farlington recently. I had a chat with Councillor Bosher about this report yesterday, and he's had an incident where someone's had their wall taken down 3 times and it's had considerable issues, and his actual response was use your SIL funding. And, you know, this is coming from existing cash limits where an identified need is there, yet it seems to be that Central Southsea is being looked at over, say, Drayton and Farlington, over Hilsey, over Copner, and you can see where that prejudice comes from. The fact is that there is no data behind the fact that, we're going to go out to consultation for Central Southsea. Well, that's well and good, but what about the residents of the north of the city, where actually they're going to look at this today, and it has gone all over the social media, actually, I might add, where they're saying, what about Copner? What about Cosham? What about Hilsey? What about Drayton and Farlington? And I don't think this report helps that narrative, because this report actually feeds into that it's very Southsea-centric. So that's more of a comment.
Is there a record of accidents in the area?
I can't tell you straight away, but I could certainly provide that information. Right. There is, as I said, speed surveys were carried out in April 2021, and the speeds on Orchard Road were between 28 and 31 miles an hour for a 20-mile-an-hour road, so that's above the level of intervention where we would take steps. Councillor Pater Harris, in response to your comments, I think one point would be that we do have to start somewhere, and I think we've given a clear evidence base as to why we've started in this area. If this is successful and this is something that residents want, then obviously as officers we would bid for additional funding in order to be able to take this type of model out to each further area, as with the school streets where we started with 2 and we're now going into our 5th and 6th school. In response to Councillor Bosher's point, we have obviously spoken to him directly via email, and he did express his disappointment that we had recommended that he use SIL funding, and we have now found an alternative source of funding for the measures that he would like on Station Road and Grove Road.
Thank you for that. I'm very happy to hear that you've finally found the money. That's great. You just mentioned about the speed surveys were taken in April 2021, and I think that's an interesting point, because the country was actually still in lockdown in April last year, so the data then and the data now would be considerably different. I think potentially they might be slower, they might be faster, there might be more cars on the road. So again, we're sitting here, Councillor Stagg, and this is why I bring things like this up, because I think data is fundamentally important. I don't have that data in this report significantly to say I'm happy with this. I mean, I understand the point about active travel, and I understand the fact that we need to do things to make people safer, to get them out of their cars. But it doesn't give me enough information. It just says we're going out to consultation for this reason. I think if we're going to come to here and actually give the reason why we're going out to consultation, we need to have a significant data set to say there's been so many accidents, so much how many cars have been caught speeding, when the data was taken. We don't have that information. I'm not being pedantic for the sake of it. I have a reason to be, and I like to work with solid data, as you probably know, and I don't see that here.
Can I just say that there's an example of this, well, 2 examples that I know of, because one is at the bottom of my road. In Copner there's one, and there's one in Fratton as well, but there might be others elsewhere. So this is not unique to Central Southsea. It's just that obviously the further south in the city you go, the more congested the roads are, more compact.
No, I understand that, Councillor Stagg, and I don't want you to send this away, because obviously there's clearly been a lot of work gone into it. I'm just slightly disappointed that I don't feel like we've been given significant information of what I would probably want, and that's me being probably data heavy in the fact that I would like to see how the decision's been made and why it's been made, and I don't think we've got enough of that here.
You could have asked for it, because I'm sure Michelle would have given it to you.
I could have done, but to be fair, I don't think it would have been here in time from my previous experiences. So what I will just note, I just think that in future, if we're going to bring reports like this to committee, I think that we should actually have the data set in the report, because it would save me asking these questions, and I'd rather ask questions about the data and then the logic behind it, rather than actually moan about the fact that it's not there. And I think you'd like that as well.
I do believe you, Councillor Peter Harris.
By the way.
Pardon?
I haven't finished.
Oh, right.
Just going to move on to the fact that obviously this has been noted as something to stop people causing congestion and ease pollution. That was something that you said earlier, Michelle. I've read a report today, and I might have mentioned this to you earlier actually, that the theory is that these sorts of schemes can actually aid pollution and cause more pollution. So how are we going to mitigate against that once this is gone out to consultation? Are you going to look at to work up a scheme that doesn't do that? Because I think 80% of these schemes, I think across the country now, are actually causing more problems than they're actually helping.
This is something that we would like to investigate, and so the purpose of this report is to ask for approval to go out and find out what the residents want. And as Councillor Horton said, it is about talking to them and engaging with them. So we're not in a position where we're saying that we as the council are doing this. We are taking those residents with them. What I said the purpose of it was to reduce through traffic and to improve air quality. I don't think any of us are as unrealistic as to think that it will stop pollution, and there may well be an element of distributing the pollution to the traffic carrying roads, but to a degree that is the purpose of it, because Goldsmith Avenue is an A-class road, and you have Francis Avenue and Talbot Road, so you have those larger scale roads. So what it is about is making the community more livable, and it's about reducing the through traffic. We don't say rat running anymore because it has negative connotations towards the residents that live on those roads, but we are reducing through traffic, and we are aiming to improve the air quality, but not necessarily reduce pollution. We live in it's still going to be a very concentrated area.
No, thank you for that. I understand that. And I completely understand your not using the word rat run. We don't want to offend the rats, not in the society we live in today. It's just a quick one. It's on 3.6 of the report. It says about how we're going to do the consultation, and I think that's quite an interesting part of the report, because it layers out a few questions about how they're going to do it. And it's just commonly something that's been done in housing recently, and I just really want to put it out there whether this is something that you guys would take on, is when they're doing a consultation, they're starting with a very open question to gather actually the whole encompassing of what the residents actually want. And I think I found from Horatio and Leamington and some of the recent consultation, Councillor Horton's nodding because she knows that I've sat through these briefings, and she has as well, that it works. And I think that would be a really good way to go with this, because it's obviously going to encompass a whole ward. So you're going to have a whole different breadth of people's viewpoints. And I think leading with an open question might be the way to do it. And then you can filter the rest out from that. Just a bit of a friendly advice, really. Councillor Horton's nodding, so she's happy with it. So I'm obviously happy that that's been taken on board. But that's all I've really got left, and I'm pretty sure you're all happy about that.
Thank you, Councillor Pate Harris. We will indeed take your suggestions on board, and the resident engagement is going to be a very open process. But you are right, open questions will work much better in this sort of situation.
Councillor Heaney.
Thank you, Lynn. Just a couple of questions to start with. We've called this proposed active pumping neighbourhoods, which I think were sometimes called low traffic neighbourhoods at one stage, but obviously I don't mind the change of names. But the other question I was going to ask was, how many areas have expressed a direct interest in going for what would be described as a low traffic neighbourhood? I think, as far as I understand it, it's some residents in central Southsea, some residents in parts of Eastney, and some residents in parts of St Jude. Have any others expressed a direct interest in the idea of going for a scheme which is specifically like a low traffic neighbourhood type scheme, rather than just being concerned about sort of wider traffic issues, if you know what I mean?
Okay. Michelle.
Yes, there has been discussions with some residents in Fratton. Obviously, some of the roads in Fratton are almost like low traffic neighbourhoods because they are already dead-end roads, particularly those feeding off Fratton Road, which is exactly the type of model that we would be looking at. So there were some proposals there. And as I said to Councillor Peter Harris, if this model is a success, then we would look to roll it out to those other areas within St Jude's, Fratton and Eastney that were interested in having active neighbourhoods around where they live.
That's useful to know, actually, because I wasn't aware that people in Fratton were taking that particular, which is interesting. I suppose I have a little bit of a whinge, and maybe it's a ward councillor whinge, that about a year ago we had a meeting with a resident who'd actually consulted other residents in Richmond Road about wanting a scheme that would restrict through traffic in the road there. We had a very nice site meeting for the ward councillors, and we were told it might take a while, but nothing has really happened since then. And I know there are all sorts of reasons why things don't happen, but there is a bit of frustration, I think, on part of the residents that I've had to go back to them saying, well, you know, it's still sort of in the pipeline with the possibility of happening. I can tell them about this, obviously. But there is a slight frustration, I think, from residents and possibly from councils as well, that how long it takes to get things going. I know we can't do everything all at once, but I just want to put in a little plea that it does get frustrating.
Well, I think, as Michelle has said, the thing is prioritised, and that is according to a sort of point scheme, if you like, so that it's not just. Councillor Peter Harris seems to think it's based on political parties. As far as I'm concerned, it's not. It's where it's needed. So, Michelle.
Absolutely. Obviously, we did have conversations with the residents of St Jude last year. There wasn't any allocated funding at the time, and as you'll be aware, there is a set funding process, and the budgets are then released within the February full council meeting for us then to use in the following financial year. So I appreciate your frustration, and I have to say it's probably compounded by the service carrying vacancies, as we are across a lot of industries within the country, and the continuing fallout, you know, from the pandemic and the way that supply chains have changed. The only thing that I can assure you is that obviously your suggestion, you know, the outcome of the meeting that we had with residents is still on the list, and we will do our very best to work through as many of the requests as possible.
Anything else, Councillor Heaney?
Just a sort of comment, really. I did have a chance to speak to one of my colleagues, Councillor Fielding, before the meeting, and just said, had he had a chance to read the report, and was he happy with it? And my colleague, Councillor John, was on holiday, so wasn't able to get in contact. But I think in terms of the general approach, I think it is the right way to do it. Clearly, with these proposals to change road and the way people travel through roads is potentially quite tricky, because you don't want to just create problems for other areas, but also to be sure that the residents are on board with it and are happy with it and the implications of it. So taking time in the initial consultation and as Councillor Pratt said, using open questions so we get a real sense of what they want is a good idea. So I have no problems with the overall approach, and I just hope that we can make progress on this and hopefully get Richmond Road done as soon as possible.
Thank you. Well, I'm very happy to go with both the recommendations. I think it's excellent to involve residents. I know from my time as a teacher, when I involved kids in doing things, when they made the decisions, they were upheld. You know, the kids looked after the things and they were proud of it. And sometimes they made decisions that I wouldn't have gone that far to make. But I think it's a really good idea, so I'm happy with both of the recommendations. Thank you. Item number 5, review of Stubbington Avenue rapid electric vehicle charge point for taxi and private hire vehicles. Hayley, thank you. I don't think you need to go through loads of background, because I think we all understand where you're coming from. So.
Yeah, so this report is just to review the usage of the electric vehicle charge point in Stubbington Avenue that was installed specifically for taxi and private hire vehicles. It's had no usage since installation. And so the recommendations of the report are to note the usage of the rapid charger in Stubbington Avenue car park, approve the opening of the charger for public use, and approve delegated authority to the Director of Regeneration to review the usage for each of the taxi and private hire vehicle restricted rapid chargers after a period of at least 16 weeks from installation and open usage to the general public if there is not proven demand from the taxi and private hire trade. So that last point is in reference to the remaining 8 that are yet to be installed.
Thank you. Councillor Heaney.
Turn myself on first. I think given the information in the report, it's sensible to go ahead with what's being proposed. There was something I wanted to raise which relates to paragraph 3.3 because it talks about the working on a bid for phase 3, because interestingly I was sent an email a couple of nights ago from someone who had made an inquiry about electrical vehicle charging. They sent me the message which had been given to them. This is what it said. It was from City Council. It said, thank you for your interest on-street electric vehicle charging in Portsmouth. Your electric vehicles register. Your interest form has been received. We're not currently installing any additional on-street charging points in the city, but we will review your request and, if it is suitable, add it to the bid for the next round of funding from the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles. For updates on the scheme, including any potential installation dates, please visit our EV charging page. I went to the EV charging page, and it doesn't really give any dates at all about anything. So actually, currently, people don't really have any idea when a bid is being put in and when they might be in a position to get their EV charging point installed. I couldn't find any information about when this is likely to happen, and the paragraph 3 doesn't
Hayley
really say
can answer
either.
that one, I'm sure.
Yeah, so in terms of the residential charge points, we will be bidding for a 3rd phase of charge points, and we will be doing that hopefully within the next month over the summer. That will then be subject to being successful in the grant award, and we will need to work through the procurement process for that one. So depending how quickly the grant award comes back will dictate some of the timescales. It will potentially take a long time due to the scale of the bid to get the detail of the site surveys and such. I would anticipate from bid submission it could be sort of 9 months to a year potentially till the last one's installed.
Because from what I understand, there is effectively a waiting list of people now who want these, who have been told they have to wait because there's no bid. Presumably we'll obviously have to work through them once we've got the bid. But the publicity really doesn't really say anything about this. There's nothing to tell people, actually we're not doing. All the publicity I see talks about the installation, and I've seen some photographs and things. So it looks like we've run out of all of the money now to install them. So we have no money to install anything. And there's now going to be a really big gap, which I think is unfortunate because clearly people are keen to do this. And this could put people off from buying e-vehicles now because we've got this really big gap between what we have been installing and then what we're going to do, which could take, next year before we start doing it.
That information could go on the website, couldn't it, Hayley?
Yeah, we can definitely update the website, so we're taking action to review that and update the information. Obviously, if we do open this rapid one, that will be an additional one, and we will be hopefully bringing forward some work to look at car parks and other locations. Energy Saving Trust have been in touch with us, offering some support to do that. So there is a lot of work going on, and we will try and do some better publication around that.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Peter Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, I'm just going to start on 3.4 of the report. I think that's a good place to start. I mean, we were awarded just shy of £500,000 from the Joint Air Quality Unit, I think formerly known as JACU. I think a lot of people call them. It's not a Star Wars film, by the way. It is genuinely called JACU. Obviously, we were given this funding as part of our amending of licensing policy, which is where I'm probably putting my other hat on now, if I may. So we were asked to change our licensing policy so we could install these charging points, and then in effect, we are now taking that right for these to be taxi charging points away. Have we actually engaged with the Joint Air Quality Unit regarding this change?
Yeah, we've asked them the question, obviously as they funded the charge points, if it's possible to open them up, and they said yes, if you can demonstrate there's not been the usage, then that's okay.
Okay, that was my first worry, that we had not allowed for, well, in case we'd have to give the money back. That was my biggest worry. Well, it wouldn't be my worry, it'd be Councillor Stagg's, because she'd have to find the $500,000. So that's that thing. Do we actually know how many electric vehicles we have from the taxi trade?
Yeah, we have got licensing to hold that information around how many are pure electric and how many are hybrid. So we do hold that. I think pure electric, there's not so many, but there are quite a number of hybrids.
Do you want to know?
If you have it to hand.
We've got 5 electric vehicles, we've got 2 diesel hybrids, we've got 158 hybrid petrols, and we've got 8 electric plug-ins. So really we have quite a low number of electric vehicles that are actually going to use the charging points, which brings me on to my second point, that it's not really a matter for here, but it is a matter that I did raise at the time when we changed our policy. We changed our taxi licensing policy on the basis that it had to be compliant to get this funding. Now, as it is now compliant and half the fleet is compliant, do we not just change the policy back? I mean, that's not a question for here, that's a question really for myself to take to the committee, but it seems quite redundant that we've actually taken a load of government money, and now we're not actually using it for the purpose that it was meant, but it's going in a good place anyway. So I don't really have much of a problem with this. The only issue that I do have is that I know what's going to happen now. We're going to open it up to everyone else, and then I'm going to have taxi drivers say to me, I thought that was taxi drivers only. So if that does come back, I'm just going to direct them to you, Hayley, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think if we do get the demand from the trade, if they do start buying electric vehicles, then we will look at it again and definitely close it if we need to.
I think it's interesting as well that obviously the trade have upgraded their vehicles from the funding that they were given, and they haven't bought fully electric. They've gone for more the hybrid models. I think that's something that we need to look at as a council. Maybe, you know, and I have a theory that I don't believe that people are going to go out of their cars. They're still going to go fully electric if they can eventually. So I just think it is what it is. You know, we've got no real choice. What I would like to know is where they are charging, because if they're not charging at the points that we're offering to them, is it because we're too expensive? Is it because it's easier for them to charge at home? I don't know the questions to those answers, and I'd be surprised if anyone did.
I do know that at least one, maybe more than one, are using the on-street residential charge points or trailing cables from their house. But we can do some engagement with them and follow up as to if there's any barriers and where they are currently charging those electric ones.
It might be worth actually noting that if we do know which ones are using on-street charging points that we've already put in, it might be worth knowing how many of those we've done, because effectively we've done 2 lots of charging for them. So, you know, I think it's a good idea to open it up, though, fundamentally, because it's not being used. I just find it ironic, Councillor Stagg, that we did all that nice stuff for the taxi trade and they haven't actually used them.
Thank you. Any more questions? No.
I think the recommendations are sound.
Thank you, Hayley. It seems common sense to me, but I think it needs to be reviewed on a regular basis, because if more taxis and PHVs come online with electric vehicles, is there, this is just come off the top of my head, is there any mileage in having set times or times which are restricted for taxi drivers? I would hate to think that somebody was using the charging point when a taxi needed to use it.
Yeah, we can engage with the trade. It's possible to do that, so we can engage with the trade and see if that's something that would be of interest.
Okay, lovely, thank you. I'm happy with all the points on that, and you will continue to monitor, yes? Good, thank you. Right, item number 6, this is Caroline. I'm sorry to have kept you so long.
That's not a problem. So this is noting paper. This is to ask you to note that we will be going into statutory consultation for a permanent pedestrian and cycle zone in Guildhall Walk from Alec Rose Lane to King Henry I Street. You'll note that this road has been closed in a temporary traffic regulation order stayed since May 2020. It was closed originally in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. It's become a very popular walking route through the city centre, and as such we would now like to go out to statutory consultation with a view to making this a permanent zone.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Harris.
It's just a very good report, to be honest. It sets out what we're after. The only concerns I have would be we did shut the road during COVID that goes under the train. I think is it Brunel Road, I think. We shut that road, and I know that I would be concerned if we try to do that again, following on from this road being put forward. Would we try and have a fully walkway? Can you confirm there's no plans to do that?
There is no plans to do that. We're seeking to put into a permanent state what is already there in a temporary one.
Okay, that's fine. I know that works really well. I think Guildhall Walk does work really well, and it's really helped with the businesses, especially since the pandemic has. I wouldn't say the pandemic's over because I don't think that's actually true, but since COVID, the businesses there have obviously expanded out onto the street a lot more. I mean, you can see that many more people are sitting out, and it's probably helped those businesses. So I'm broadly in support of it. The only thing I don't like is, as I've just mentioned, I wouldn't like it to go through Guildhall Walk and then shut that road again, because I don't think that particularly worked.
Now, I think that demonstrated it didn't have proof of concept at the time, which is why it was reopened. And as you note, we have worked really closely with all of the stakeholders locally in preparing the proposed TRO that will go out for statutory consultation.
Honestly, I'm quite happy to commend the report, Caroline. It's very good.
Councillor Heaney.
Yes, I'm very happy with the report, as Councillor Peter Harris is too. Yeah, I mean, the idea of making Guildhall Square a bit more of a friendlier square is really good, because I don't think we make enough use of that public space there. If you go to many European cities, their squares, are really lively. There's lots of interesting things going on, and they are something people want to come to. I mean, obviously we have events sometimes in there. We have the ice skating and we have the film things and so on. But yeah, if we could do more with that and make it permanent, I think that would be really good. I mean, just an observation on the question about Isambard Brunel. The problem we have with Isambard Brunel Road is that it's a bus route, and you can't really stop the buses and change all their routes, but then the driver is able to stop other vehicles using it, and that was the problem. They were just ignoring the signs. And so I think there's a practical issue about how we change roads, and that particularly if there are shared routes with buses, which we can't always control. But that's a bit of a side issue, so I won't go on about that. But no, this is very good. I'd be happy to support that.
Yes, the closure of Isambard Brunel Road was an emergency measure, wasn't it, in COVID, so was never meant to be permanent as far as the funding was concerned. But yes, you've done a fantastic job there as well, Caroline, so well done, you and your team with Guildhall Walk. So yes, please go ahead with the consultation. Thank you. Simon, last but not least, the supported bus services. Would you like to give just a quick overview?
Yes, I will do, because I realise it's a very long report, so I will do a quick overview. The purpose of the paper is to outline the City Council's current position with regard to supported bus services and to seek agreement to extend the current existing supported bus contracts, which expire 31st of December, and run them through. They run at the end of October, run them through to 31st of July 2023, and also to make arrangements to carry out some funding for what are currently commercial bus services, which, following a network review, that all local authorities were required to carry out network reviews with their local bus operators of the commercial networks to identify what services were unlikely to be or would not be in a commercial position when all the government funding has come to an end, because there's been a series of government funding with the outbreak of COVID where the DfT have met the shortfall in passenger revenue that bus operators have had as a result of that. That all comes to an end at the end of September, and so this is identified three services, or four services, which require some additional funding to keep them going. And that will happen for a short period of time where we then re-tender the network, and that will include those services. And I don't think, Mr. I need to put up.
Thank you, Simon. I think there are a lot of issues, aren't there? The bus companies, and then not as many people have gone back to using the buses as they were pre-COVID. Costs are going up for the bus companies, so it's not an easy thing. But at the same time, we need to get our bus patronage up, and this is where BSIP comes in. But we can't use the BSIP money to support schemes, services that are not viable at the moment, can we? So we need to get the passenger numbers up on those in order to make them sort of supportable by BSIP.
Sorry, yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Is that all right? Have I got that right?
You're correct that the BSIP funding, of which the council has secured a large amount of funding, be one of the most successful in the country. We can't use that to replace existing services. We can only use it to enhance existing services. So we can enhance. So if you want to double a frequency, then you could put it into the pot to do something.
Lovely, thank you, Graham.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One of the questions about one of the survey questions, question 16, it's a minor point, but I couldn't work out on the boxes. It's 1, 2, 3, it's the fourth one from the left. It says travelling to and from a something or other, and I don't know what it is, because it says travelling to and from work and travelling for work. I can see the difference. So what was the travelling to and from a something or other? Do we know what that was?
I have no idea. Simon.
Sorry, Councillor, can you explain exactly where...
Question 16, on page 31.
And the first column is
there's
for recreation, leisure.
What is the primary reason for you have caught the bus today? And it says recreation and leisure, going to shops, visiting family, travelling to and from a ... And then it says travelling to and from work, and then travelling for work. So I don't know what the travelling to and from a is.
I don't have that off the top of my head, but if you give me a minute, I can have a look.
The other question I was going to ask was about the passenger numbers on page 19, 20. You talk about the passenger numbers month and then comparing the 2 years, 2021. And it says this is the supported bus service. Is this the whole usage? Because 13, 14 is only subsidised for certain
Sundays,
times of the year.
yes.
So it's commercial during the week. So are the numbers for the 13, 14 only applying to the supported element of it, not the whole service? Is that
Yes, but they want us to actually...
They now want us to pay for all of it. I know that,
Yes,
yeah. But I was just wondering if the survey figures for 13, 14 are applying only to the supported element of the thing, or whether it's the whole service usage for 13, 14.
Simon.
Yeah, that's correct, Councillor. That they are for just the Sundays, so, and they fluctuate a little bit because it depends also whether you get 3 or 4 or 5 Sundays within a month.
Yeah.
But yeah, they are just for the Sunday operations, and the Sunday operation is 4 journeys in each direction only, whereas on the weekday service, it's an hourly service for a far longer operating day.
Actually, given that they're asking us to fund the sort of weekday service, it would be quite interesting to look at the figures for the usage for that. I don't know if we have access to that, because it would be an interesting comparison. I can understand why, if it's very low usage, they wouldn't want to do it commercially, but it'd be interesting the figures for that and for all of them, actually, because I have a wider interest in bus services across the city, not just in areas where I'm familiar with. So I'd be interested.
Do you happen to have the numbers? Not with you now.
No, I don't want them now. I'd just be interested to look at them maybe in the future.
But for the 13, 14...
And the other ones.
For all of...
For the non-supported usage, because it's different for each service.
Yeah,
isn't it? Yeah,
precisely.
So I've just clarified the figures we got over the supported element.
Yeah.
So I wanted to see the comparison of the figures for the non-supported element to see how much it varies. So sometime later would be okay. I don't want it now.
Can you get hold of those numbers, Simon?
We can. In fact, for services 13 and 14, we've been carrying out surveys of all passenger journeys when we got an indication, so we could get an idea exactly. Because it's not just the number of people on the journeys, where they're actually travelling within that journey, because the service doesn't, as I mentioned at the briefing for members, that it doesn't logically, it's not how you'd put a service together in terms of planning it if you were starting from scratch. So in terms of the opportunities...
But I think Graham would like to see all the
For all of the different supported, so the X4,
I don't
what I'd be
no,
interested
I think
in
it's all
seeing
these services, the unsupported ones as well. Yes?
information about the usage of the services we've identified here. So some of them are supported for part of the time, some of them supported all the time. So for the ones that are supported only part of the time, I want to see the non-supported element of the travel. Does that make sense? Yes. Then, so
it does. So for service 13 and 14, for instance, you wanted the Monday to Saturday.
The Monday to Saturday.
Which we can provide that where we are going to provide support, yes, or where we propose to provide support.
Lovely, thank you.
That'd be useful.
Anything else, Councillor?
I think that's all in the way of questions. I mean, interestingly, this is purely sort of anecdotal. I mean, the comments that we've had about respondents talking about is that other respondents said services are inconvenient, regular, I think maybe irregular and frequent where they need to get them to go. It talks about the number 2 being indirect, unreliable, particularly for time-critical travel, such as school pickup or commuting. Excellent service apart from Sunday evenings. And these are all sort of individual comments that the people have put in. Is that a sort of general summary of individual comments about the service? Is that right?
That's correct. I mean, they're the individual. They are individual comments that people have made. But some of the comments are more common in terms of the lack of frequency is a big issue in terms of services, and that reflects a lot of the supported services that we have. In terms of the 22 is every 70 minutes, the 25 is every 45/70. So again, they're not particularly attractive frequencies when you compare them with the main trunk services, which run every 10 to 15 minutes.
And I should imagine it would depend on the purpose of people's travel. I mean, if a service doesn't go early enough when you're working, you're not happy with it. So, anything else?
No, I think generally, we are where we are. I don't think we can.
But we've got to get from where we are to where we want to be.
Well, yes. I mean, I suppose the thing that would be most concern is to try and make sure the services do actually meet what the people who potentially use them could need, because I think there's the issue about who uses them now and what do they need, but then who could be attracted to it if the service was a bit different. I know you and I know about the 13 and 14 and its frequency.
Yes, quite. I noted that not many people use it for the buses for work, only 12%.
Because it's a 50-minute service, basically.
Well, no, I think this is for anything. I think, I don't know, maybe it's not. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Peter Harris.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Stagg. It's quite an interesting report, and I'm just literally looking at. We've got the passenger numbers. I think it's page 19. I think Councillor Heaney referred to it earlier, and obviously for the supported services. Do we have a rough idea what number these would have to get to ensure that we didn't have to give a subsidy? Because I think that's always worth knowing what the passenger number we have to get to. And I'm looking at a long-term thinking here, especially I know we've got the large BSIP funding, which is great. Do we actually have those numbers available?
We don't have them as such, but because each service is slightly different. So if you look at Service 12, which is an off-peak service only, so it doesn't incur the vehicle cost of purchasing the vehicle. That normally would then be met by the other main trunk peak hour service. So effectively, this is running on marginal costs, and we could work out roughly based on the subsidy how much we would need to go. But I would suggest you'll be looking at a lot of these services. You'd most probably looking at possibly doubling the number of passengers.
No, that's really interesting. I think it's just worth asking the question so we know. I like key performance indicators. I like targets. I like to know what we're trying to aspire to, because fundamentally it'd be great if we didn't have to pay any of these monies to the bus companies to run the services. It would be lovely, wouldn't it? And you would absolutely love having that money in your budget to spend on things that were actually would really help the city. But also, I just note, obviously this isn't a comment for you, Simon, so don't worry, this is one for Wayne. He's been lined up all day and he hasn't said anything. So it says, obviously, in the Director of Finance's comments, which I know you're not the Director of Finance, Wayne, I know you have to sign it off. But it says to meet these services, it requires an extra £161,000 and it can't be made from the existing cash limited budget. Where would that be coming from?
Several sources it could come from. One of those could be the Park and Reserve. It's an appropriate use of the reserve. Or we could choose not to do something else in TNT, or we can look to find external funding. Those two other choices are probably unlikely.
Would that choice be down to the cabinet member to decide if he wants to? I'm just not putting you on the spot, by the way, Councillor Stagg. It's just so I know how the decision is going to be made. So Councillor Stagg wants to axe a project, or she wants to take it from the parking reserve?
Yeah, so there's delegation to Councillor Stagg, myself and Tristan Samuels to approve the use of the parking reserve.
In a roundabout way, you've just told me it's coming from the parking reserve. It doesn't flesh it out, that was all. I just thought I'd best ask the question.
Well, I suppose the other things would be to cut some of the services, make them go later or earlier or whatever. So
I am disappointed about one section of the report. It does say all wards except Hillsey and Paulsgrove. My residents obviously clearly feel disenfranchised that they aren't being thought about. But I'm clearly.
We've got all the buses in Hillsey.
We have. I'm joking,
so
Councillor Stagg. I am joking. The only other thing I wanted to mention was when this report came last time. I think I was here for another matter, and I stayed for my sins. I don't know why, but it was raised about the bus companies being exempt from the clean air zone, and we were paying the cost. Are we still paying a cost for that?
No, we're not. That was only it was for bus service 25 because it went into clear zone, and no, the buses have been retrofitted, so they now don't incur the charge, and we're not paying that charge.
Oh, that's great. That hasn't been made clear to anyone at the moment, because I got asked by, funny enough, a taxi driver saying how disgraceful is the council paying the bus company's clean air zone charge, and my exact words were, I don't know if that's true anymore. So I can dispel that narrative quite quickly.
I believe it was done very early in the year, January, February, I believe, is when it stopped. So
I believe they just miscalculated. They didn't realise that the 25 went actually into the cars.
No, that's fine. I don't have any other questions. We are where we are with the bus companies, unfortunately. It's a necessary evil, in my opinion.
Well, I've noted the findings. I'm not happy, obviously. We have to extend the current supported bus service, and just have to be nice to Wayne to see where we can get the money from. Notes that waiver approval will need to be sought from procurement needs to inspect the proposed extensions to the contract set out above. That's a legal issue, presumably. And prove the development and implementation by the Traffic and Transportation Service, supported by procurement and legal services, of a procurement strategy to re-tender the contracts, which we've got to do, because when do they have to be done by, Simon?
We'll be looking to award in June, so immediately after the elections. So we will be tendering at the start of the year, the calendar year. Right.
Now, you've got to close your ears to this one, Wayne. Approves additional funding is made available to support those services identified to the network review as follows. But we haven't actually done a network review yet, have we?
We have, yes, Councillor. We've done it with both operators. And
I haven't seen it.
No, you haven't. What's happened is that the operator came to us and said, these are each operator has grouped the services into three categories. One is services which are commercial or will become, then there are some that are marginal, which they think will become commercial. And so the X4, which is why there's funding there for the X4 for 6 months. And then there are those services, which is the 13 and 14, which are not going to be commercial. And so, which is why they're moving on to supported. But it was a very short time. The DFT set us a very tight time scale that we had to submit.
You and I talked about possibility of having slightly different routes, which would be more appealing to people, particularly in the 13-14.
Did indeed, and I think that that's something that we can work through with the BSIP opportunities, because that would allow us to double the frequency, make more direct, and that is different. That is a different funding, but this is just for the short period until, and that would allow us to, yes.
Okay. Additional funding to be agreed for supported services 22 and 25 for a 6-month period. Part fund the cross boundary. Excellent. That's Hampshire is paying half, I think, isn't it? And we're paying half.
No, it's divided. We pay. Southampton pay, I think, about 10%. We pay about 25 or 30%, and Hampshire pay the rest. Because it's based on a mileage, and the X4 is the Southampton to Portsmouth route. So a lot of it is within Hampshire.
Right, and there's a paper we brought back to the June 2023 Traffic and Transportation Cabinet meeting following completion of the procurement process to re-tender the contracts. It's not good news as far as money is concerned. It's not good news as far as the services are concerned. But I think it gives us, we need to work on trying to increase passenger numbers, and I think we have to work, because CERT is going to be, well, I don't know that it will affect these, but certainly with BSEP, we've got to get the numbers up if we're going to get a decent bus service network throughout the city. So, right. You okay with that, Alison, what I've just said? I'm okay, the recommendations, with a certain amount of, not regret, but, you know, I don't know what else we can do. So, thank you all very much. Thank you.